Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining. My name is Mike Bank. I'm the Vice President of Sales and Marketing for Synoptic. We appreciate everybody joining. Quick intro to Synoptic. Synoptic is founded in 2001. We are an IT consultancy and managed service provider with approximately 700 full-time employees serving global customers. This is another edition of our Synoptic webinar series. And essentially, it's an ecosystem of learning resources addressing leading industry topics containing thought leadership and frame-breaking concepts. Today's objective, we hope to bring you a webinar that is of value and should only take about 45 minutes. That's our goal. And that topic today is contained in today's top list of business transformation and operational efficiency topic, and that is business intelligence. Many innovative and competitive firms are utilizing methodologies and deployment frameworks as well as skilled resources to elevate their enterprises. We will be presenting a proven and tested roadmap, a maturity model, and all of this coupled with critical success factors and a use case to illustrate the realized impact of business intelligence. I want to remind everybody that this is an interactive webinar, so please submit your questions in real time inside the chat box. We will address them within the presentation. Any unaddressed questions that we don't have time to get to, we will have a consultant that will follow up with you personally. And with that, I want to introduce the two subject matter experts and panelists for today's webinar. First is Martin Liberal. Martin has established his consulting applications development career within Accenture, where he was involved with implementing web and client-based technologies for Washington Mutual, now JPMorgan Chase. Martin is currently Synoptic's Director of Business Process and Systems Consulting. His focus is to help clients scale their business through business process and technology consulting. Martin holds extensive experience within financial, manufacturing, retail, and services industries. His expertise also resides in application development, business intelligence, and business process consulting efforts. The second panelist is Brian Thurlow. Brian is a business intelligence or BI architect for Synoptic, where he partners with clients to define BI architecture and mature their BI practices. He has focused the last 15 years of his career on BI and enterprise architecture, as well as ERP systems. Brian has developed his career at Micron Technology, as well as GE Aircraft Engines. Brian has Six Sigma projects around process development and implementation, and has authored several smart grid programs. He has a certification in IASA Certified Architecture, ITIL Foundation, QAI Test Engineering, as well as Six Sigma. And with that, Martin, I will hand off to you and to Brian.
Thank you for that introduction, Mike. Welcome, everybody. We're very excited to present on this topic today. BI is not new. It's just different. It's evolved over the last 4 years, more so than it did in the prior 40 years combined. So today, we're going to start the presentation by defining BI and providing some thoughtful reasons on why you might want to invest in a BI initiative if you've not already done so. Then I apologize in advance if you're hungry, but we're going to use food as an analogy to describe the evolution we've seen with BI from the technologies available 13 years ago to the platforms we have available today. Following the evolution of BI, we're going to talk you through a sample roadmap to achieving BI maturity, knowing there could be many barriers to building a BI practice within your business, including leadership buy-in. We'll then dive into a few slides outlining key success factors. We'll outline a BI maturity model, explaining how you can go from limping to competing analytically. And finally, we'll close out with some real-life case studies. So we look forward to presenting this, and I'd like to hand it over to Brian to kick it off.
Hi, everyone. This is Brian. Thank you for joining today's webinar. We'd like to start off by doing a level set and describe, in our perspective, what is business intelligence. We believe that BI is a set of processes, methods, tools, technologies, and certainly people that take data and ultimately turning into actions. That's the ultimate goal of business intelligence is to make the appropriate actions that maximize your efficiency, your profitability, whatever your goals and success factors are. BI goes by several names. You'll hear things like analytics, data warehousing, machine learning, dashboarding, et cetera. And yes, even Excel can be used successfully for business intelligence at a lower maturity level. We've all certainly heard you have to measure it to manage it. And one of the best ways to look at your metrics and your measurements is through business intelligence of some form. BI also brings a complete holistic perspective of your organization when it's built out right. You truly get that 360 perspective. And we like to suggest that in today's business organizational world, BI is really a requirement for success. It's no longer a nice to have. Why should you invest in business intelligence? Quite frankly, you're losing money and you are less efficient without it, guaranteed. Your source systems typically are in and of themselves not going to preclude this. Reporting and so forth that comes with source systems is typically not sufficient. You need to have a business intelligence practice in place. Otherwise, you're losing money and you're less efficient. Your people are doing BI, whether you support the effort or not, and sometimes unbeknownst to you, they're performing BI. They have to in order to meet the goals of your organization and again to be at their maximum efficiency. So BI happens. Best to grab a hold of it and guide it through some of the things we're going to share with you here today. Without a doubt, we say almost always it provides ROI. I've never been really engaged in a business intelligence project that did not have a healthy ROI. So we're going to walk through the evolution of business intelligence. This again is sort of a level set to kind of explain from our perspective where we've come through time in the domain of business intelligence. And so essentially, since the time that IT has really taken off, even going back to the 1970s, all the way up through about 2005, we want to call this era technology-driven reporting. And this is where your IT department was in complete control of gathering your data and preparing it and provided it to you oftentimes through fixed reports that were very difficult and time consuming to change, even adding a single column or certainly making a different calculation required weeks of effort, going back to IT, going through the requirements process and so forth. And so that's very similar to an experience you have in a formal restaurant. In this case, the IT department would be the kitchen. They're going to prepare a set menu, which you choose from to get your food, of course. And it's the same with the data. The data is essentially a preset group of data that you pull from for your reporting. So this works, but it's very slow to change. Definitely a model that we've moved on since 2005. Beginning around the 2005 timeframe, we saw a lot of business intelligence tools coming out that were termed self-service tools. And this is where the IT department began to provide data through data marts, data warehousing, other sorts of preset aggregations, preset groups of data, which you could, using these BI self-service tools, grab that data, do a drag and drop type of a GUI interface, build your own reports, and to some extent, you had some flexibility to create the reports that you needed and the business intelligence solutions you needed. This is really not dissimilar from a buffet style restaurant experience if you think about it. So as of somewhere around 2010, we've entered into what we'll call the era of the empowered data consumer. This is end user business intelligence. And we're seeing some very powerful tools such as Microsoft's Power BI platform, Tableau, there's several others, but these tools are very powerful, very user-friendly. Yes, you can use a very technical approach to these tools, but for the most part, they empower a data consumer, someone who is an analyst in the business who may have some technical skills, but is not a technologist per se. Very strong tools, and this is very similar to what we're seeing now with meal kits. You can have delivered to your home, or you can go to your grocery store and pick up a meal kit. The raw ingredients are there. You get to pick and choose what type of raw ingredients you want, and at that point, you're creating the meal of your choice. We're seeing this today, And this really has enabled a huge explosion in capability for end users in business intelligence today. So let's talk about BI maturity, and let's look at it through a roadmap that we like to share today. This will be from two perspectives. From one perspective is competitive advantage, and as you see the roadmap goes up in maturity, you'll see some much greater competitive advantage that comes to you. And then also just generally in maturity going off to the right in this graph. So at stage one, we consider that to be analytically impaired. And this is where you have some data, you have some management interest. Typically that management interest is at the organizational level or even lower in the organization. Is typically not coming from your leadership, your CXO leadership of the organization. And it's very much driven oftentimes by pain points that you're having in the organization, be it operational efficiencies, profitability, what have you. There's a need to go about doing some sort of business intelligence. So it begins. And after a discussion with your leadership, typically a CXO will say something like, well, prove it to me. Show me that it's worth the investment that we need to make. And so a localized analytical approach occurs, and this is stage two. So this is where, for example, your finance department or manufacturing or operations, HR for that matter, whichever group within the organization will begin to pull some of its data into tools such as Excel, maybe Microsoft Access, but tools that for the most part have minimal engagement from your IT support and IT department. And so this goes on for some time and some metrics come out for that particular business group. And there's a review, whether it's formal or informal, there is a review. Your CXO, your leadership will see what you're doing. And if there's understanding and support, then you move into what we would consider level 3, which is analytically inspired. And this is where your executives are beginning to commit to a BI program. They see some of the initial benefits of that, and you're actually beginning to plan and fund for business intelligence. If that's not reached, then what we see often is that these programs are terminated. Local efforts are considered a failure at this point from an overall organizational perspective. And many times these types of efforts stall here. So they'll remain within the business unit that started them. They'll continue to exist in a minimal fashion at this point. What we've also seen is going back to stage one, oftentimes you'll have some leadership that says, I get it. I understand the business intelligence value proposition. And perhaps it's because they've seen it in a different company or they have talked to peers in other companies and they understand it. And so in this case, you're able really to, for the most part, skip the localized analytics aspect of this roadmap and jump right into being analytically inspired. So you may still build the local analytics solutions, but you have the support of your leadership, and that's a huge step. Stage 4 of the roadmap to BI maturity is where you become analytically driven. At this point, we have enterprise-wide analytics across the organization. We have executive buy-in, and it is now business intelligence is now becoming a corporate priority. This is where you begin to see various sort of statistical measures come into your organization, be they Six Sigma driven or other types of methodologies, but really metrics are well known, they're understood, they're communicated, and we really begin to see some significant value from business intelligence at this stage. The final stage, stage 5 of this roadmap model, is where you're an analytic competitor. And this is where business intelligence is just a way of doing business. It's integrated in everything you do. You're continually attempting to improve the business through analytics, through business intelligence, and it's just a second nature at this point. There's a significant amount of investment in people, process, and technology at this stage, and it's a given that the ROI will continue to be seen.
Hey, Brian and Martin, this is Mike. We've got our first question. If you could address this, please provide examples of real benefits back to the company where a firm has moved from the impairment stage to stage 4 or 5. Any investment needs to show material return.
I'll take that. With early improvement in quality of data and integration of various systems, we expect to see ROI mostly around operational efficiency, particularly when people are spending less time putting data together and reports together manually and spending more time analyzing that data to make decisions. We will be diving into some case studies here soon that will showcase some examples of BI wins and experienced ROI, producing anything from 25 to 50% efficiencies in a relatively short period of time across different departments and industries that our customers represent. So I think these case studies will be a little more compelling and may answer that question a little more directly.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Martin. So what are some of the areas you would want to focus on to move up towards the upper right of this roadmap towards your stage 5 being an analytical competitor? We'd like to suggest some critical success factors for business intelligence based on the acronym DELTA. We'll walk through each of these. The first is data. So data itself needs to be governed. You need to ensure it is of quality, accuracy, and there's all sorts of processes and methodology around performing this. Data in of itself is a significant area of focus for business intelligence, and is the first part of our Delta approach. Enterprise. This is an enterprise focus. So you may begin, as we saw in the roadmap, you may begin with localized analytics, but you do want to move to an enterprise focus. This is where you get maximum coordination of your resources, be they people or funding, and this is where we get buy-in across the organization towards business intelligence. This is also where your senior leadership is able to explain the benefits and understand the benefits of business intelligence across the enterprise. So speaking of leadership, the L in Delta is leadership. Very important that leadership across the company, but particularly your senior leadership, understands the benefits of business intelligence, that they, as we say here, they foster an analytical culture, that it is part of how you do business and it's an expectation, and is also going to be properly funded from a leadership perspective. Targets. So thinking back to data, data in and of itself is not a target. Data is data. Data becomes information, of course, but now we need to look at targets. What are the targets, both at an organizational enterprise perspective, but also at a particular business unit level? And technology, of course, BI today cannot happen without technology. We're fortunate that the tools have matured greatly just in the last 5 to 8 years within business intelligence, but technology is a critical enabler, critical success factor and enabler for business intelligence. Analysts, the people part. So oftentimes when we begin business intelligence, it's localized experts, people who are subject matter experts in the data, and they oftentimes take some training and get self-taught on particular BI tools and approaches. Well, as you mature through business intelligence, really want these analysts to be fully educated and oftentimes certified in various technologies and methodologies. That's the best way to prepare your people actually for success. And then finally, analytical techniques. So all of the prior critical success factors here need to be managed. They need to be following an analytical technique of various sorts that are out there, so that we can make sure we're getting the maximum efficiency and benefit from all of these critical success factors. We'll revisit these in a next slide.
Okay, Brian and Martin, a couple questions have come in regarding the Delta framework. I'm gonna just throw one at you. Which of the Delta business intelligence critical success factors are higher priority? What should I focus on first and why?
I'll take that question, Mike. Good question. So from a prioritization perspective, you really want to focus on all the critical success factors equally to assure a balanced and controlled BI maturity approach. This is because each of these critical success factors truly are required for a successful BI strategy and maturity path. And quite frankly, they rely upon each other for effectiveness. That said, if I had to pick one of these critical success factors to focus on first, it would without a doubt have to be leadership. And in particular, your senior leadership of your organization. Your senior leadership must understand the value that business intelligence can bring. They must be your strongest supporters and, quite frankly, your strongest champions of the BI practice. Thanks for the question.
Yeah, very good. Thank you.
So let's take a look at a business intelligence maturity model, which is based upon the critical success factors we just reviewed, the Delta acronym you can see on the left side of the screen. And then let's lay that out over the stages of BI maturation, which we reviewed earlier, which are, of course, impaired, localized, inspired, driven, and ultimately competing. So for each of the stages of maturity, we've outlined a very brief example of what we would think each of the critical success factors might look like. So in stage one, your data, for example, may be very inconsistent, may have poor quality. All your disparate source systems have a different perspective on the data. And when you attempt to pull that into, for example, an Excel spreadsheet or maybe an Access database, there's a tremendous amount of manual effort to munge that data together and to harmonize it. From an enterprise perspective, there's virtually really no focus at the impaired stage. I won't go through all the rest of these, but you can see we've given some examples at each of the stages. And this model builds out through the various stages all the way to ultimately to stage 5. But you might ask, well, based on your model, would an organization necessarily be entirely within one stage? And the answer is no. In fact, we hardly ever see that. We see organizations at their critical success factors are at different stages according to their level of maturity. Some of this maturity, particularly at the lower level of maturity we're showing here, these stages of maturity happen in, quite frankly, in an ad hoc manner. Once you begin to form a BI strategy and actually execute it, then you see these moving towards the right, moving towards a more mature perspective, such as what you see here now with the green boxes. You see them move towards the right. But again, you're not necessarily always within one particular stage. That's normal, it's healthy. This is just how BI progresses. So there's 5 stages. You can see several examples here. Now we are recording this webinar today, so you'll be able to freeze the frame at this point if you'd like to look at that in more detail. And of course, we're always available to speak to any of these stages and critical success factors in depth.
Okay, so another question has come in regards to the BI maturity model. A statement, please clarify the criteria on each stage, or maybe an example of what each of these addresses.
I can take that one, Brian. We anticipated there might be some interest in learning a little more about each of these. In the interest of time, we can't dive into them today. However, we do plan on creating and publishing maybe 10 to 15-minute informational webinars on each of the individual Delta critical success factors here in the very near future. In fact, we close out this presentation today discussing exactly that. So we'll provide a link to our YouTube channel. You can subscribe. You'll get a notification when those get posted, or please check back at a later date. So we'll hope to do that soon. Any other questions before we move on?
I don't see anything else in the queue. You make a good point, and what I would share with folks is that this is something that we place our customers through. They ask a lot of the same questions, and I think it's a good setup for future webinars. Thank you.
Thanks, Martin and Mike. Let's take a look at a business intelligence maturity curve. So we've already spoken about competitive advantage really being the 5th stage of BI maturity and the ultimate goal that you like to attain to. But that really can be divided into 2 areas, as you see on the left side of this particular screen. Daily support with analytics, so operational type analytics. And then as you mature, you get into actually competing with analytics. And so some examples of what we would call descriptive analytics in the daily support area, operational area would be alerts, being able to query and drill down, drill up in your data, being able to provide the data so that ad hoc reports can be built to meet your business agility needs. And of course, standard reports are really a basis and a beginning point for BI here. As we mature, we move up the curve, we get into predictive analytics. We're able to do some forecasting. This is where some initial statistical analysis begins to come into play, and we attempt to look not so much in the rearview mirror, but through the windscreen at what's coming ahead. How can we predict that? And then prescriptive analytics, we're really optimizing at this point, doing design of experiments, those types of things. Some Six Sigma approaches and so forth come in at this level. And then at the highest level of maturity, where we are truly competing, we have a lot of autonomous analytics, machine learning, AI, these types of things, cognitive analytics. And so really an example of this that many of us would be familiar with is if you shop Amazon or really the Google products that are out there that many of us use. There's a lot of automation happening behind the scene there. A great example of a very high mature level of analytics.
Guys, there's a question that just came in on the intelligence maturity curve. Is this graph showing complexity in skill set, technology, or both? What kind of skill sets are required for getting to the level of sophistication required for predictive and predictive analytics?
Hey, Mike, this is Martin. I'll take that question. It's a good question. It's absolutely both. As Brian mentioned earlier in the presentation, analysts on your team or Excel gurus across the organization, they can pick up skills necessary to be strong users of tools like Power BI and Tableau that are available today. These visualization tools are incredibly powerful, so your average guru can do some really great work with the platforms in a relatively short period of time, of course, assuming access to quality data. As we move up the y-axis, however, predictive and prescriptive analytics do require more skill set and even more tools. These folks are typically trained or educated, certified to build models, develop algorithms, use more sophisticated languages such as R or Python that are specifically meant for some hardcore trend and forecasting analysis, experimental design development, statistical analysis, and things like that. So these efforts do require a higher skill set and additional tools. And finally, in that top tier, implementing machine learning, that's not something an individual does, right? These kind of efforts really do take a team effort, demanding high quality skilled resources, not just a resource or two, again, across various practices. So teams implementing some of these more mature solutions can be comprised of developers, data scientists, big data experts, cloud computing engineers to produce some high quality solutions. So yes, absolutely, up and to the right does require more skilled resources and the use of some of these advanced technologies. Thanks for the question. Any other questions before we continue?
Nope, for that one, no questions.
Okay.
Thanks, Martin and Mike. So we've shared a couple different perspectives on BI maturity, the maturity curve, the maturity model. And you might be asking, okay, this is really good, but I'm kind of difficult to really understand where my organization might be and what would be some technology examples of how this might play out. So let's look at some specific technology examples at each stage in BI maturity. So really at its roots, at its basis, the business intelligence lifecycle can be boiled down to 3 stages. We gather data, we prepare data, we present data. Now, this is actually very complex, and there's a lot of technology and processes and effort that goes in doing this, but at the end of the day, that's really the process. You could also add that really after we present the data, we want to take action on it. So that's probably the most important aspect of business intelligence is getting action for your organization, more efficiency, more profitability, whatever your goals and metrics might be. But as far as getting to that point, these are the steps we follow. So if we look at the impaired stage of maturity, you're oftentimes going to see the people involved would be your CFO, CEO, director of HR, various leaders who are directly involved in using Excel, perhaps something like Microsoft Access, but oftentimes it's just Excel to provide reporting. I would not call this business intelligence. I would call this what it is. It's reporting. And oftentimes this is their second or third job. There's a tremendous amount of time that goes into this. You're pulling data into multiple Excel spreadsheets. Sometimes there's a team of people that maybe are helping you perform this. And while this works at an initial stage of maturity for BI, again, the impaired stage, there's a lot of variability in the data. Data quality is oftentimes not easily addressed, and there's a tremendous amount of effort and work on your organization to make this work. As you grow and you want to focus more on your business and less on managing Excel spreadsheets, this becomes very, very difficult. So at the second stage of BI maturity, the localized stage, this is where you're oftentimes using something like Excel to go directly to a source system and pull data. You may at this point be building a Access database or maybe even a formal relational database management system type of database, but you're building what we'll call a data mart. And that contains data for, in this example, the finance department. It's financial data. We're pulling it in from a source system. We're making changes, doing some aggregations and this type of a thing. We now have people that have some level of skill within the finance department that's performing this type of business intelligence. And you also see on the right-hand side of the slide here that we've adopted some sort of a business intelligence tool, certainly for local use, but perhaps even cloud use. And it might surprise you at this level that at the localized level of maturity that we're doing cloud-based BI, but as we shared previously, powerful tools like, for example, Microsoft Power BI, they make using cloud sharing of data very straightforward. Dashboards can be shared between your organization through the cloud. And so these tools actually do become part of the maturity step at localized. As far as the people engaged, your leadership is going to be locally focused. Your analysts and your subject matter experts are going to be locally focused. Metrics are local, and then data governance is going to be local. So at this point, there is some beginnings of data governance. There has to be. Once you start pulling data into a database such as a finance data mart here, we do need to be using some level of data governance. At the aspired level of BI maturity, now we're going after several source systems. We are using technology to grab that data, perhaps not Excel, or I should say in addition to Excel, we're doing this. This is where we use various sorts of scripting, ETL, APIs, application programming interfaces, web services, all sorts of other technology. We typically have somebody that is skilled in these types of approaches that's helping us pull the data. And also within the organization, you may see additional data marts start to pop up for the different organizations. So in this example, we have the finance department, finance organization, and then operations department both have a data mart. Doesn't mean the data is harmonized between the two. Oftentimes it's very disharmonized, but the data is there and your people do the manual processing to harmonize it. And then the BI tools we mentioned before still exist, although at this point we've probably gained quite a bit more expertise. The people involved, you can see across the top of the screen, are the same, and our focus does remain local at this point. So when we're driven maturity, at this point we're beginning to reach out to external partners. We have the skills and capabilities to do that confidently and appropriately. And you also will see enterprise data warehouses begin to pop up. So the data marts will continue to exist. You could make an argument whether they should or not, but oftentimes they do at this point. But an enterprise data warehouse begins to show up, and this is where we're really beginning to harmonize the data. Our data governance is global at this point. You can see it across the top of the screen here. Leadership, analysts, these types of things are really beginning to take a broader perspective in your organization on the data. And then finally, at the competing level of business intelligence, you can see we're beginning to pull in web data, streaming data. Our data warehouse is much more mature at this point. We begin using big data and machine learning and artificial intelligence, cognitive learning type tools that are available today. Your people are going to be much stronger skills at this point, and it truly is ingrained in the organization. From a focus perspective, the leadership at this point is definitely global. They're definitely looking across the entire organization. Your analysts, your subject matter experts are going to be both global and local. They're going to keep their local perspectives, such as finance or operations here, but they're going to have a very strong global perspective. Metrics are going to be global and local, as they should be. Data governance is going to be very mature at this point, and we'll definitely have a global perspective. So this is a traditional approach But in the last few years, there's been a technology that really has helped us avoid the scripting and the copying of data from source systems into, physically copying, if you will, into an enterprise data warehouse and data marts. And that's a concept called data virtualization. If you build a common model that represents your business, your organization, and how you operate, you can leverage that model, we'll call it a semantic model, to pull the data from your source systems and make it available virtually. And in many cases, you do not need to actually copy that data into a data warehouse. This is a proven technology. However, to take this approach, your senior leadership has to have a very strong understanding and a very strong level of commitment to go into business intelligence. This is where we build what we call the logical data warehouse. Martin, would you like to speak to us about some case studies?
Yes, thank you for that, Brian. So we're going to go over a couple case studies here. I'm not going to read these couple slides verbatim. So as I talk a little bit about the customer and what they were looking to do, what we accomplished for them, feel free to read some of these bullets. This is an example of a customer that was primarily in the localized stage, I would say. They had real high executive sponsorship, they had the drive, they had the budget to be a little more mature and be analytically driven. So they were certainly on the right path. Given their space to help improve the marketing efforts of their customers, there was a high focus on using vast amounts of data across various platforms such as social media and professional outlets. This customer had already started developing a BI program internally. They really just needed some help with implementing BI platform in the cloud to really leverage data warehouse solutions in Azure and integrating data from various systems, including external systems. So they were well on their way, and so we came in to help them kind of do an assessment of some targets. Where should we focus our efforts? Where could we make the most impact in the least amount of time? And what we found was that they were doing a lot of analysis in Excel, and that analysis just required people to pull data from various systems kind of manually and do some crunching in Excel. And so kind of the shortest path to some great ROI was helping implement a data warehouse. We chose Azure as a platform. They were already using some SQL servers on premise. So we went with Azure Data Warehouse and implemented Power BI to point to that data to provide some operational reports that helped mature their own internal processes. The interesting thing here is that they took their learnings and applied them to the products and services that they provide their customers. So not only was there kind of an internal return on investment, we saw a 25% increase in their internal sales team's efficiencies, but they took their learnings and applied it to their customers. So their customers benefited by this particular implementation. So it was about an 18-week implementation for version 1, just to get something out. And that's kind of our approach, very agile methodology. We want quick wins. We want to put what we develop out and in use, so we gain, everyone's buy-in on some of these new technologies and processes. And you slowly start to build on that. So the maturity really is an evolution over time. So this is a great example of a customer in the data, media, and marketing services industry. Let's look at the next one. So this is a customer that was a little low on the maturity level. I'd say they were in a stage 1, really, when they engaged with us, which can be typical in the construction industry. They're not as reliant on technology as other industries might be, but they provide construction and maintenance services for various industries and had similar situations where they just had a lot of data. It was on premise, and they weren't getting the most out of the data available to them, and largely because they just were running off older technologies, older SQL servers. They had not upgraded along the path of Microsoft's upgrade, and were losing support because they were on older versions that were no longer supported by Microsoft. So we came in and we helped them do an assessment of their technologies. In this case, it was very much technology focused for this particular case study, and really just matured their technologies by moving them to later versions of SQL. really leveraging the capabilities within SSIS, SSAS, SSRS, all these acronyms that many of you may be familiar with. And again, also leveraging Power BI to really take some of that data and get some good insights out of it. So with the data warehouse expansion, with this particular customer, we saw some efficiencies of at least 50% improved ROI, mostly through the accuracy of data. They were doing things so manually and systems weren't integrated that the data quality was a real hindrance to their ability to use data to make better decisions. Agile report development based on business user requirements. So again, just kind of slowly working through the various departments and what data do they need to make better decisions. Start developing reports jointly with their business leaders to help them use the data that we were now collecting in a more efficient and accurate manner. These are just a couple case studies. We have many others that we'd be happy to share if there's interest. And so just in the interest of our schedules here, I'd like to move on to the next slide, unless there's any questions.
No questions.
Okay. Thank you, Mike. So where do you start? There's going to be various people on this call that are probably at varying levels of maturity within your own organization, and maybe even you've already started some BI initiatives, maybe you have not. So to speak a little broadly to the entire group, where do you start really depends on where you're at. And Synoptic's services really just offer a suite of services tailored to suit your specific needs. If you are starting from scratch or you really don't know where to start, we can help you with a BI health check, where we really just come in and evaluate your current capabilities and help provide a formal evaluation recommendations for improvement. Maybe you already have the right technologies, or maybe the strong skill set, or maybe you already have leadership buy-in, and you just need some help with the BI strategy. We can certainly come in and help you with that too. Develop a long-term BI strategy, define your targets, define what that architecture needs to look like, really looking at the key critical success factors, and put a plan in place, because it is an evolution. So if you need help with a strategy, we can do that as well. Data warehouse solutions. So in the case of the construction customer of ours, lots of internal systems, they're not really talking to each other. They couldn't do historical reporting because data got overwritten or whatever the case may be. Maybe a data warehouse solution in the cloud is what you're looking to do. Data lakes, data marts, we can help you with that. And it doesn't have to be Azure. It could be AWS or other platforms. So happy to take a look at some of your data warehouse needs and help you in that area. Another area we can help is with the pure visualization piece. Maybe you already have the right architectures in place, but you're still using Excel or SSRS, where a lot of those reports still need to be in the hands of a developer to actually develop them. And you want to start producing this culture of these amateur analysts in your organization where they can create their own visualizations with tools like Power BI and Tableau. We can certainly help implement and help you identify which tool might be best for your practice, implement those tools, train some of your users, or even help develop some of those visualizations for you. Next is just big data solutions. Everything from strategic roadmap and technology evaluation, customizing platforms, leveraging the various platforms that are available to us today. Our team is available to help navigate all the stages of your big data journey. This is the fun stuff, right? So if you're even at a place in your journey to be even thinking about big data, then most likely you're already a little up the maturity stack, and maybe you don't quite know how to take it to the next level using big data. We can absolutely help. And lastly, just cloud business intelligence, really leveraging the power of the platform. It really just speeds delivery when we can leverage platforms that are out there. You can also do proofs of concepts at a much lower cost of entry than what otherwise would have been proof of concept before these platforms existed. So if you're not quite sure about which direction to go, do you use Azure or Amazon AWS or Google Cloud or private cloud, we can help navigate those discussions as well. So it really just depends on where your company might be, what types of skill sets you have, what tools and technologies you already have in place. We can help navigate any and all of that. That's really what we're here for. And hopefully with today's presentation, you got to see a little bit about how we might approach some of your project needs. So with that, I'd like to take a look at the next slide here. And to wrap up, just some key points coming out of today's webinar. We do offer a no cost, no obligation BI health check to help you understand where you might be at with your BI maturity level and where to focus for improvement. As I mentioned earlier, someone asked a good question, so as a good lead into this bullet here, coming soon to a browser near you, right? We will be presenting short 10-minute informational webinars on each of the Delta critical success factors. Below there, you should see a link for the YouTube channel. If you subscribe, you should get a notification when those webinars are posted. Check out this book. If you're an avid reader, if you're very interested on how to get to a point where your business is competing on analytics, this is a great read. There's some really great case studies in here. They were fun to read. They talk about UPS and Netflix and even sports organizations like the NFL and how they're using data to be the best and to compete against their competitors in the industry, or even in how to use data to move into parallel markets. So it's an incredibly interesting read. It's an easy read, even for the non-technical folks who might be on this call. So it certainly doesn't require, any kind of technical expertise to be able to get through that book and enjoy it and get educated on some of this. And lastly, just any final thoughts or questions, comments. We certainly thank you for being here. We'll use the next few minutes here to wrap up with any questions you may have.
Martin and Brian, there's a number of questions that are in queue, but just for time's sake, I'm just going to handpick a couple. First one is, what technologies and platforms do you have the most experience in and apply towards solution deployment?
Brian, would you like to take that?
Yeah, I'll take that one, absolutely. So we are solution agnostic. If there is a particular technology that you have a preference for or maybe some experience with, we are able to support you in that area. That said, we do have expertise in the Microsoft stack. We've spoke of Microsoft Power BI, the Azure stack and so forth today. We have strong expertise there. We have expertise in Amazon AWS and services there, and also on-prem solutions, which is often can be a good way to start.
Great, thank you. This is a question that actually came in from a couple folks, so I'll combine these in something that we hear a lot. What does Synoptic's delivery model look like, specifically onshore, offshore resources?
Mike, I'll take that. This is Martin. Synoptic, we're a global digital transformation consulting firm, IT managed services organization. We do have over 700 employees worldwide, roughly 400 in the US and Canada, and 300 in several locations across India. So that's just the nature of our business. We are a global company, and we understand that our customers are also global, right? And they're in various countries themselves. And all that to say that whether you need to be price competitive with the solutions that you're looking for, or if you need to meet ITAR regulation restrictions and can't do work overseas, we really do work with our customers to develop a resource strategy that makes sense for you, all making sure that we deliver high quality results for keeping in mind your budget constraints or your regulatory constraints. So that could mean a blended model. It could mean a 100% onshore model. It could mean on-site, remote. It could be all of those things. So we really do, similar to being technology agnostic, our resource plan, whether onshore, offshore, or a blend there, is something we work with you to help define. Good question. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. The next two questions are going to be my questions, just for clarification. If you could, just in the essence of time here, just very succinctly, for those folks that are interested in that free BI health check, what's really involved with that? Could you be, just a real quick answer with that?
Yeah, this is Brian. I'll take that. It is a virtual engagement where we will spend a couple hours to speak with your senior leadership and go through a set of questions and a tool that we actually have that provides some analysis. And so we will visit each of the areas of the Delta critical success factors and have some questions about that. And based upon the responses and based on general feedback that we get, we go off, we come up with a summary, and then we have a call with you where we share that perspectives and findings, and then we're happy at that point to talk about how we go forward and help you mature your BI practice.
Great, thanks. The second question that I have for you all, we obviously covered BI in this webinar, but as an organization, there are a lot of other services around managing platforms, because once you implement something, there is more of a life journey to the technology platform. What other services can Synoptic provide to complement BI?
I'll take that. So we do have several practices within our professional services organization. We have a product and application development practice, largely focused on .NET and open source technologies. As you heard today, we have a BI and AI practice, focuses on the services we've outlined in today's webinar. We have collaboration teams, really delivering SharePoint and desktop modernization solutions, largely leveraging the Microsoft 365 suite of solutions. We do have a dedicated QA, UI, and UX team, really 3 separate teams, and each of those complement to ensure high quality and user-friendly designs. We have dedicated teams delivering ERP and CRM solutions for our customers. So these are some of the business process and kind of system consulting practices centered around your business systems, be they third-party ERP products or custom products that you use internally or even share out to your customers. And really within the realm of Synoptic services, all of those professional services are complemented by our IT organization, delivering high-quality network systems, security solutions for both on-premise and in-cloud architectures. And then lastly, we kind of combine all of those capabilities. We can support it all. So we have a global managed services team. They're responsible for uptime, operational support of your systems and of your users. So it's really all services that complement each other and consume it all or take the parts that are needed for your business. We're happy to talk more about them for any questions you may have.
Right. Thank you all very much. I want to thank all the attendees for attending our Business Intelligence webinar, another extension of the Synoptic webinar and Learning Resources series. All other questions, and there's a number of them, will be responded to by one of our consultants. We will reach out to you. And if you have any other questions, you can see Martin and Brian's contact information there, or go to our website. Thank you all again for attending.